What's going on, everybody? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. What? Hey,
Reed,
yeah.
Reed, is this the new permanent style? Period.
Well, I mean, I've got both of them, so I can just stack them on top of each other if I want to.
Do you wear many hats like Elon?
I guess I am now. I have a couple on my desk, but I don't know. I just got the cowboy hat. It's. I don't know how honestly I mean, it's a very poorly ventilated hat. So when you wear it outside, which is, I guess, what you're supposed to do, your head gets so unbelievably sweaty. It's like,
Really?
but it does provide really good sun cover. I will say that.
You also have a head full of hair, so I'm sure that probably doesn't help with the ventilation either.
No, perhaps not. Danielle, how are you?
Hello, good morning. I know. I actually was just thinking, I wish I had the audio from the opening clip as like an alarm clock. Would certainly get out of bed at the gong sound.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Christian can dial that in for you.
It's okay. I don't actually want that.
I wasn't paying attention to what you just said because I was like confused by the layout that we had here, so I needed to fix that. But what about an alarm?
The audio, no, I was up on time. The audio from the intro to Freak on Friday has an alarm clock when it goes off, or the sound for my alarm.
That'd be psycho status. No thanks, don't do that.
Oh, that would be psycho status. I think it's already. Reed just got used to it, but he just couldn't. He just couldn't take the whole like intro audio in general, especially with the loud gong at the end.
Yeah, I like it. It's a little anxiety provoking, but we all need that sometimes.
Danielle, so what's been going on with you? You've been hitting the fraud stuff hard these days. How did you get into doing all this?
It was a quickly rolling snowball. It started. I want to say it started with the Chattanooga wreck.
Oh, that
there was so much that happened all within the same week. I think that was the very starting point.
That was an Amazon. That was a relay truck, right?
Yeah. And so it really all started. I was very focused on Amazon relay, and then my focus got broader. Sorry, I was trying to down my coffee. My focus opened up a little bit more, and that's when I downloaded the FMCSA DOT registry, all of the companies per se that have registered for DOT, and I was just scrolling through it, doom scrolling.
Your life basically got consumed by it for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and then I started filtering. At first, I just organized columns, and then I realized what was in there was concerning. So then I started using filters, and that's where it got worse. And then it is a mess.
So what's been the craziest thing you found?
There's a lot. I'm not going to speak. You can share all the obviously details, but I do want to preface that Danielle basically did a contributor article through Great Caviar, and I helped her package it together, but Danielle wrote the whole thing, and it was basically about all the different findings that she had in terms of the lack of consistency, I guess, in the data. So Danielle, if you want to maybe talk a little bit about this, I can pull it up here in the background, but just some of this stuff is just so seemingly like obviously should be taken care of, but it's not.
Yeah. And the reason that I went into the FMCSA database is because after the Chattanooga wreck, after all of this mess with the Amazon relay, I wanted to know how these people were getting into or onto the road. Not necessarily how they were getting CDLs. We know how that all works, and that's a mess too. But how are they getting
how are they getting authority?
Yeah, how are they getting federal authority issued to them? How are they getting approved? And so that's when I went into the database. And there's three big issues or patterns that I found. And it's not the examples in this article. While it is 3 examples, these are everywhere. And the first one that I found, which I actually missed a lot of them the first time I ran this,
which one is it?
It's the no name one, the one you're on.
Okay.
I'm following you.
Yeah.
You can literally register your company
yes.
with no name.
Yes. So, this is the person's name, and it's legal because the immigration IDs or the documents that they give you through a shelter or through the DMV, wherever you go to get it. Well, you have to go somewhere and then to the DMV. But because of the way that the names work elsewhere, they don't translate to first name and last name in America. So they just get no name given, or FNU, which the first time I pulled this list, I was only looking at no name given with the spaces in between each word. But there are so many variations of this, it's very easy to miss them and then not be able to match them up.
Now, is this an issue of people like trying to be anonymized, or is this just like a clerical issue because we can't facilitate the names and they're I mean, they're not all necessarily bad actors, correct?
Right. Yeah. And there are always exceptions. I would say the exceptions in all of this are the good guys. Unfortunately, exceptions should be the bad ones. As we keep going and continue talking, I'm using examples from this list where I started pulling out their US DOTs and looking at them and the history that they have with the US DOT, and it's fascinating. So clerical issue, potentially, yes, but certainly being taken advantage of.
So the one thing that is surprising to me about the no name given thing is that at least I know from what you've so far found that in California, this is what is allowed. I don't know if this is allowed in any other state driver's license, but at least there was a driver's license that I think, you found or was posted on X a couple months ago from an accident with just no name given. And as you said, there's like no space, name, space given, but there's also no name given all as one word, for example, or it's all lowercase. And I think part of the pattern that just started to be discovered here is that when you do any data entry on the internet, like into forms or whatever it may be, like we have this problem at Chipper CRM too. It's like if data doesn't get entered in or formatted for the user or standardized or structured and whatsoever, it ends up becoming a giant, like the biggest mess that nobody wants to deal with later, right? So this is basically what we're seeing.
And I know from the IDs I've seen and from the US DOTs that are in this list, it is mostly California. I think I have it up to 136 of these were California out of the 141. So those were registered in 2025. And then there were a couple from Indiana, maybe one from Texas, but mostly California.
Reed, if you had to choose a first or last name, but not both, which one would you go with? Would you go with only first name or only last name?
First name.
First name. So Reed it is.
Yeah.
Reed no name given.
I'm pretty sure I used to give produce loads to a guy named No Name. No, but these. I mean, a lot of these. Yeah, it would be crazy if all these people were necessarily. I mean, there's no way they're all bad actors, obviously. I don't. Perhaps, like, do they have a choice in this? Like, is this just like they show up, they hand like whatever documentation they have to like the DMV or whatever, and they're just issued this name, or are they choosing this name?
So that part I don't necessarily know because I haven't been with them.
That seems like a critical question, right? Like if this is willingly, I'm choosing the name, no name given, or I have no choice and this is what I get. Like that's two very different things.
Yeah, and before they get to the DMV, they have to have paperwork of some sort. there's an entire list on the California government site of what type of paperwork will work for this. But it could be like a utility bill. It could be residential documentation from a shelter or an agency that they passed through as they came in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know.
So there's a lot going on here.
Yes, a lot.
Look, I think the fact that there, to Reed's point, like there surely can be some good actors that maybe don't have a choice in whatsoever, like what their documents are. But I think the address, we can kind of dive into like the patterns around the different addresses and the fact that you observed.
And this looks like a pretty nice complex. They got a nice little pool. They got everything they need there.
Yeah.
So this one is actually incredibly interesting, and I missed it the first time until I sent it to Christian, and then he said, "I don't know what I'm looking at," and then I was like, "Wait, why doesn't this make sense?" And now I understand. So out of those 141 no name givens above, there were 12 address clusters, meaning there was more than one USDOT registered at an address in that 141 list. This is the biggest cluster out of all of them, and also goes along with the data entry and no standardization. These addresses, if you look, more than half of them are Riverside, California, and the others are Jurupa Valley, California.
Mm-hmm.
So the first time I had this list, I had it separated into two because the city is very different. But then I went to look up the address and put it on the map, and it's the same building.
It is.
And then also I organized this list by name, alphabetical by name, and some of them, I think,
you start to see that their name.
Yeah, so no name given Ravender down near the bottom of the list. He used Jurupa Valley on his USDOT that was just filed and it's pending, and then the one that's not authorized was Riverside, California.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I don't know what you guys think about this, but in my view, it's like, if the address changed, like you can see, like it's the same person, same street, different apartment number, but it's a different USDOT number.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's kind of like where it starts to become like, I don't know, my eyebrows start to go get raised. Basically, it's like two separate USDOT numbers at the same address, different apartment number, same person. It's like, okay, it's pretty common, I think, for people that are in Chicago to know that a lot of the carriers, like I don't think anybody, it's not really anything secret. A lot of the carriers in Chicago, they have second MCs, third MCs in some cases, right? And so I think part of just what you're observing here is that like how if you really just look at the information, how much more broadly this is a problem, just even outside of Chicago as well too. Chicago is just like from what I knew in the past, but
yeah. And so for most of these, and this example, yes, but then the pattern that goes along with this is that they run up the safety and the violations, and they're either placed out of service and then not authorized, so they can't run, or they just run it up and then they're filing for that second USDOT a few months before the other one is shut down. Yeah. So then as soon as that one's shut down, they just switch the papers on the side of the truck and keep going.
Reed, how do you feel? How do you feel in general about multi MCs? Do you have any thoughts?
I mean, it's definitely common. I feel like if there wasn't a day that went by back when I was booking freight where you were talking to somebody, they were calling in, or you called a truck on like a load board and you saw their MC, and then you called them and they were like, "Hey, actually, I'm using this MC or I'm using that MC," and oftentimes the one that they were posting under was like compliant, like we could work with them, and then the one they gave me was like a new setup or like, you know, only a couple months old or no inspections or whatever. So, I mean, it's definitely common. I mean, does it necessarily mean they're bad actors? No, not per se, but it's
I know of one fleet in particular here in Chicago, which they operate like they do. There's a second MC in the picture basically, but I know how they operate, and they operate very correctly, properly by the books, everything. But because of the fact of how they can get blacklisted for just like the smallest of mistakes, or a broker just gets pissed off or whatever, they're like, they all of a sudden don't have any loads to keep all their drivers being paid. And that was the explanation that was given to me, which at least it made like logical sense from a business owner's perspective. But like whether or not that should still be allowed, that's
But for clarification, so you can have multiple MCs. That's legal. However, there's only one US DOT registered to one business. So I can have one US DOT and have multiple divisions under that. So I could run like one group is hotshot, one group is reefer, one group is drive-in only. Those could be 3 separate MCs. But that one US DOT is for the entire company. So having multiple US DOTs is a huge red flag.
That is,
and that's what all these people in question are doing.
Yes, it's not multiple MCs. And MCs are going away, so I'm not going down that rabbit hole because they're being phased out. But the US DOT is one business entity per US DOT.
Interesting.
So okay, I mean, I just don't even know what they do about this. Like, do they recognize the issue? You guys have dug into this a lot more than I have. My only experience with this is just booking loads. So I don't, and it's only, and that's been, 3 or 4 years. So I feel like it's gotten, orders of magnitude worse in the last couple of years. So I don't even want to even pretend like I have too much experience with it, although I can understand it.
I think, so we'll have like the last 20 minutes. Well, we're going to bring on Garrett and Ben. We can talk a little bit more about like what to do about this, because there's a couple of ideas that I proposed and that Garrett and Ben were kind of on the other side of as well. And I wanted to make sure that we covered like one of the more outrageous things that you found, Danielle, which was that one carrier with 2 trucks.
Yeah. It's my favorite one, probably.
Yeah.
So this one, the way this one came up, Garrett actually on searchcarriers.com, he made us a leaderboard for Blitz Week back in May. And this carrier, who is registered with 2 trucks, those 2 trucks, that part of the USDOT is self-reported information. So you can put whatever you want in there.
Yeah.
Allegedly, purportedly, they're running with 2 trucks. But during Blitz Week, they had like 800 and something inspections. The number that we're looking at now is the current number, which their USDOT was set as not authorized 10 days ago. So they're not running under this USDOT anymore. They do have another one. They just kept going. But this one is fascinating. Also, this USDOT was started in mid-February of this year.
Damn, they got 1,200 inspections?
They did all of this with 2 trucks in 4 months.
Man, that must be a pain in the ass to get stopped that often.
Which Ryan at Genlogs saw me posting on this one, and he ran it through Genlogs and sent some pictures of the trucks. There's certainly far more than 2, but because they have reported 2, and that's what the federal database is giving us, that's what we run with, because that's what the government says.
That is, I want to get back to this, because this is going to be, this is super interesting to me. I went down this rabbit hole, started going down this rabbit hole, as Danielle began putting some stuff to light too. So we're going to put a pin in this real quick, bring on Chris Burroughs here from TIA. Chris, how are you doing? Oh, you're on mute.
Good to see you guys.
What's up, Chris?
Repping the caviar swag too.
Repping the merch today. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Chris, wanted to bring you on to touch on a slightly different topic, and we can change gears a little bit to the big UNFI story that took place over I don't know if it's still going on, if they've resolved it, but would love to hear kind of like what the whole situation is, how that happened, what you currently kind of know about the status of it, and so forth.
Yeah, so we were reached out to by a local Austin news channel this week, kind of with a breaking story, if you will, that Rhode Island-based company United Natural Foods had been kind of one of the latest victims of the latest ransomware cyber attack. And what they were seeing in Austin, obviously where Whole Foods, their grocery store is headquartered, is a massive shortage, huge supply chain disruption. A lot of the details about what exactly happened haven't necessarily come out yet. They're keeping that pretty close to the chest on what the details are. Obviously, it looks like some sort of ransom attack where these cyber criminals come in, ask for a ton of money. We all know how it goes from here, but obviously it's created a massive problem in the state of Texas. Our office in Alexandria, Virginia is located, literally a block from the Whole Foods. So of course we ran down there to see what was going on, if it was affecting us in our nation's capital. There were some shortages. I don't think, probably what you're seeing, certainly within the headquarters, but as we saw, in 2021, I believe it was, with the Colonial Pipeline ransom attack, these attacks put major disruption in the supply chain. We all saw what that did to the price of gas and shortages. So obviously, as we look at this, just the operational disruptions that have happened and will probably continue to happen, because I don't think, to your question, I don't think it's been totally fixed yet. But their TMS, their warehousing management systems, obviously being down or certainly delayed, leads to shipment delays, production shutdowns, inventory mismanagement, just a disaster in the supply chain that we're seeing with, empty shelves. Or I think there was one employee from Whole Foods that was quoted in the Texas area that was like, we're getting a whole bunch of inventory and product that we don't need, and the stuff that we do need is not coming because of obviously this disruption in the supply chain and then within the system, and they're ordering the wrong stuff, and it's just a mess. So I think it's just another example of this fraud pandemic that we're dealing with that just continues to plague the supply chain and plague the industry.
I have to say that I was this has deeply affected me, as I went to Whole Foods the other day to get a sparkling water and they didn't have any. So I'm a victim of this. No, I'm just kidding. What has Unifi commented much publicly on this or no? I haven't seen much.
Yeah, the media I've looked into, they haven't really publicly made a lot of public comments. So no, they're not.
I've only found information on this through Reddit.
And so there's right next to my place, there's a Whole Foods, like not even a block away, and around 11 p.m. every day, there's a Unifi truck that starts taking over the entire street and basically blocks anybody from getting by. And so far I haven't noticed, and maybe it's come at a different time, but so far I haven't noticed it in almost like the last week since I've gotten back from Europe, that any delivery has been made there. So I don't know, how does a Whole Foods, or how does I guess that would be, that would be a customer of Unifi, but how would somebody like Whole Foods manage a situation like this, where if your entire supply chain, or a big portion of your supply chain, it seems like a majority of the deliveries that get made to this Whole Foods are from Unifi, how do they deal with trying to change where the goods come from, change the supply chain in real time, effectively?
Yeah, I think a lot of the issues have to deal with electronic systems that have been hacked into and were more or less kind of held ransom. So I think a lot of it is reverting back to manual processes, which is time consuming. Nobody wants to do it. Technology has made this industry a lot easier, and when you're talking about just in time logistics and precision timing and coordination of getting product to a shelf, obviously technology plays a massive role in that. So obviously things that you can do to alleviate this, there's obviously increasing your cybersecurity. That's not a full, 100% silver bullet that's going to affect everything. But having those recovery plans in place, manual processing.
Do we think they took out the fax machine? Do they have to go that manual?
They were using paper and like pen and paper. I did see that.
I'm wondering
running off copy orders.
I'm wondering how this has affected the pricing of their lumper services for unloading at their warehouses.
Their stock has dropped, or over the past month, the stock dropped 30%.
Of Whole Foods or Unifi?
UNFI, sorry.
Yeah, that, Reed, to your point, that's probably why a lot of these companies don't come out. I think we had the CTO of Target come to our Tech Innovations conference a couple of years ago, and obviously this is a massive brand problem. So they're going to keep everything extremely close. And Danielle, to your point, 30% down. That's.
Yeah, I bought some.
You went long.
Stuff like this you'll recover from, and I'm sure that this is not.
Buy the dip, baby.
Well,
yeah.
I can't say I'm sure that this is not going to happen again, right? But I think that depending on the severity of the situation for Unifi, will they, if they're, if the board's competent, which I'm confident that they do have a competent board, they'll address this in a way that's like there's better mitigation strategies and plans going forward. I'm sure the employees are going to have much more rigorous like security protocols and stuff like that, which might get annoying and so forth. But that's when you're operating a supply chain as big as.
Do we know if this is a ransom situation? Like, is that public?
I haven't found anything.
I think it's a speculation, but I think that's what most people are thinking it is.
Yeah, that's crazy. You can't. It's Whole Foods. It's not like they can just swap distributors like on the fly. I imagine. So this is probably. Didn't Bezos just get married recently? I wonder if he's caught wind of this. I wonder if he's involved in the situation.
So I don't know if
probably not.
Well, there's one thing I want to mention, which is this just kind of came to my head. There's a couple of things that I noticed happened like over the last week, roughly. And do you all remember when, like about a week ago, the entire internet basically almost like shut down?
Yeah.
Like, the cloud services,
everything,
Amazon, and I'm not entirely sure if that exactly was related or not, but supposedly that originated from like a Google Cloud like a authentication policy server or something like this. But nonetheless, there's another report that came out today, which says that there's 16 billion passwords that have been leaked across Apple, Facebook, and Google. And I don't know if potentially this could have been a part of it where somebody obtained, a password for somebody to be able to log in into an account. And like this stuff does get sold on the dark web. So this is all speculation, but it's just like something I wanted to bring up, which is like I noticed like in the last week, there's just been a lot of like cyber related activity that I don't know if it's all connected or not, but
so I do know within the last year, I don't know the date exactly, but they moved all of their IT, they laid off a bunch of IT workers, a ton, and moved that offshores. And then in the comments, Edburn just shared an article that the Pennsylvania distribution center is closing and laying off more than 700 people.
Wow. Hold on, let me pull this up. That's from what is it? Penn Live? Penn Live.
Yeah.
Okay, so this seems pretty big. 1 second. Let me pull this up here.
Among the employees, 172 172 truck drivers.
I wonder
It'll
if this
start August 12th.
Is this related to the? Do they say if it's at all related to the event?
You have to think that that's something like this has been planned for a while. You can't. I feel like it wouldn't be related.
I wonder, they would have had to file a warn notice for this one.
They do.
It was dated June 10th.
Yep. Provide 60 days in advance of covered business layoffs. Maybe they're anticipating, that the recovery period for this incident might potentially be, take a little bit of time, because I think it was about,
June 6th is when it
so
abruptly went dark.
By it, you're saying the internet or
UNFI.
UNFI. Okay. So I guess that might be like in a timely manner. They kind of expected it might impact the business, and anything else you learned, Chris, from people that reached out?
I think to Reed's point, I think this certainly has been in the works, and just dealing with general fraud across the supply chain and what our members are seeing. This is extremely sophisticated. I mean, these are not folks that are just going on, grabbing passwords and doing this. This is well thought out, well planned criminal activity that's going on.
Yeah. I wonder what other major customers UNFI had, or if Whole Foods is like. Hopefully,
I bet it's a lot of local grocery stores are impacted by this. Yeah. Whole Foods is, I think, the big name. I mean, they're one of the largest food distributors in the United States, right? I mean, so they're massive. So.
Yeah, hopefully they're not like a big, like more than 20 or 30% of their business just comes from Whole Foods, because that would be, that'd be tragic for sure. Any other thoughts you guys have on this UNFI situation?
I hope they figure it out.
Yeah, me too.
That's my thought.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to. I mean, UNFI is one of those companies that, like, historically, people have like poked fun at them because they charge so much for lumpers. I mean, I know their lumpers are third party, so they don't necessarily set the rates, but like they're an easy target, but it's easy to forget that it's like a real business with real implications, and there's like actual people that work there, and it's not all jokes, I mean, this is like an impactful situation, and hopefully they figure it out, and I can go buy some sparkling water at Whole Foods here soon.
Some Saratoga water, so you can do your 4 a.m.
They still had Saratoga.
Okay. Well,
yeah,
good.
they had. Yeah. So that was good.
No disruption in Reed's morning ritual anymore.
No. Yeah.
Chris, you were in the background stage when we were talking about the earlier topics regarding the FMCSA data findings that Danielle has been investigating. I was curious if you had any thoughts. We're going to have in the next couple of minutes here, we're going to have Garrett and Ben join us, which you're more welcome to stay for, like a debate format around what potential solutions to this data issue could potentially be taken. But was wondering if you might have any thoughts. Didn't get a chance to ask you that, but since you spent a lot of time at in DC and with the regulators and so forth.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, and kudos to you guys, and kudos to you, Danielle, for pulling all that data together. I would say from an association perspective, somebody who's been with TIA almost 15 years, and literally one of the first pieces of legislation I worked on as the head of the government affairs for TIA back in 2011, 2012 was the Fighting Fraud and Transportation Act. So we literally have been screaming about fraud to members of Congress and regulators and the administration for 15 years. So to see all this stuff come to light is it's extremely frustrating, to be honest. We all familiar with there was that Wyoming address a number of years ago where there was 400 or 500 carriers that are associated with it. It's probably a processing agent, but nevertheless, the principal place of business requirements were not being adhered towards. And we flagged it for FMCSA, and I know they have resource issues, and I have a lot of good friends over there. And they were like, "Yeah, we sent an investigative team out. There's nobody working there. We say with certainty there's no trucking company operating out of there as their principal place of business." And it's like, "Well, what are you going to do? What's your next step?" And they're like, "Well, there's not a whole lot we can do." And as an organization that's trying to fight fraud and working across with everybody, in the supply chain that's dealing with this, that's pretty frustrating. I pulled up some comments that we had filed back with the FMCSA from 2012, talking about the sale of MC numbers and reincarnated carriers and chameleon carriers. And, we had a quote in here from Truck Stop that we put, and again, this is from 2012, to FMCSA, any change in ownership usually flags a change in the company's methods or operations or business practices. In the case of a broker, this means a change in pay and contract terms. For a carrier, this may mean different levels of insurance coverage, rate structures, etc. Unfortunately, it's also well known that certain insidious elements within our industry will purchase and reinstate MC numbers for the purposes of committing fraud. 2012 flagged it for the FMCSA that, hey, there is fraud that's going on in this industry, not to the level, obviously, that we've seen in the past few years. So not to, complain and go through, kind of a, session here of me, but it's infuriating what's going on.
And Chris, who's responding? Who's telling you that is it an individual? Is it a FMCSA that's telling you there's not much that we can do? Or is it?
I mean, it's, I'm not going to name names of people at FMCSA, but yeah, it's the folks that are career, FMCSA officials who have been doing this for years. So again, are great people, but we just really need them to, we'll put a sports analogy here, get off the sideline and get on the field, and let's start putting some play into action here.
Do you think that this is more of a regulatory solution kind of framework, or is this a combination of regulatory and some technological improvements at the FMCSA, or something else?
I think it's all the above. I think it's regulatory. I think it's technology. I think it's enforcement from law enforcement. I think it's all above approach to address this problem. I mean, going back to 2011 again, there's a lot of great products out there. But for instance, we went in and met with it was a FMCSA administrator, Ann Farrow, and we're like, hey, we've got this product, TI Watchdog, where members can go in and report bad actors. We'll give it to you. We'll literally let you have access to it, so you can see and make decisions on carriers if it's legitimate information. Obviously, we weed through that. Have access to it. Reach out to all these other companies that are doing this in the space, all these, fraud prevention or carrier selection tools. And they were just kind of like, we're good. We don't really need to use that. And it's like, apparently you do, because we're seeing what the problem is. We've seen it for years. This is, I'm glad this stuff's coming to light finally.
I think that's the most frustrating piece for me, is that we have tried to fix this with technology as like third parties, but everything that we do is on top of the FMCSA. So as long as these guys can get in and continue getting in, then there's no way we can stop them. The good brokers, the good people using these, trying to use good guys, they're not going to use them, but someone's going to. If they're continually spinning up US DOTs, they're making money somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I think there's a couple things that we had talked about on X around like potential solutions. I threw some around, and there were some rebuttals as well. So we got Ben, and I think Garrett's going to join us here shortly. So we're going to bring up on Ben. But Chris, I do appreciate you coming on and your thoughts and your comments. You're more than welcome to stay for the debate as well too. So, but Ben, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Ben,
Ben.
do you want to give us a quick intro about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm here in Minneapolis. I started a freight factoring company back in 2011. In 2022, I was approached by somebody I knew from the industry who was doing DOT compliance. That business has been in existence since 1973. So I bought that business a couple of years ago and started getting deeper into the compliance space. And then at the end of last year, bought another brand in the compliance space. And so that's been, given me more and more access and insight into the, all the authority data, right? And I've been as a factoring company for years was kind of flummoxed by the quality of data that we could get. And so, but just in the last, year or so, since the FMCSA opened up the data sources to be more public, that's really been eye-opening, and fun to dumpster dive through some of that stuff, right? So
it was a dumpster fire.
Dumpster dive is such a good phrase for this.
That is a great expression. Garrett, we got Garrett on as well here too. He's going to join us for our, of course, very civil debate that we'll have here shortly.
What's up, everybody?
Garrett, could you just quickly introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, I'm Garrett Allen. Mostly on here for searchcarriers.com, which I launched a couple months ago now. As Ben put it, the dumpster dive of FMCSA data, trying to make that a little bit easier to get through and understand, what the data means, and just kind of surface a lot of the stuff people aren't aware is out there. So.
And I think the tool that you made, Danielle's been using obviously a lot as well to do a lot of her findings. And it's been only I think a month since you've launched it, or maybe even less than that.
Yeah, I think it's been like maybe 2 months, just under 2 months total since we launched that. But yeah, we launched it. Tons of data, millions and millions of data points, basically all the FMCSA data, kind of like standardized, making it easier to look through, and then also surfacing it in a way that people can actually like read it and know what's going on. There's a lot of tools out there that like look at this data, but I think a lot of them don't do a good job of actually like connecting the dots. So just working on that. We have another update coming out. We have a release coming out in like 2 weeks, which will have even more, some new data sources as well. It's going to be we're going to have crash information now on the front page, more inspection information. And also some tooling to help with like more history lookup stuff on the front of like if you pull up a carrier, being able to actually look up the history of like the authority and things of that nature. So lots of new stuff coming. I've got like a huge roadmap coming for the rest of this year. So go check it out if you haven't. It's free. So you can go click around.
I'm really happy that you brought dark mode early on in the life of this.
Of course.
App.
Garrett is the real hero in this story.
That was a critical value add on the safer data.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I did of course, everything I build, it has to have a light and a dark mode read. You know this. And once I did that first release, I'll be honest, I actually was like, are people even using dark mode? I actually debated getting rid of it. And then I saw people
on dark mode.
Yeah, I saw people start posting pictures in dark mode. And I was like, all right, they're using it. So we got to keep it around. So I've continued to
This is the data we really care about, Garrett. Right.
Exactly. All right. So we had a back and forth on X, and I'm going to just preface this with the context of like what exactly this how this debate kind of originated. But I made a post, and this was definitely in light of Danielle doing a lot of discoveries. I kind of was just like, all right, I'm gonna get into the arena too here, and let me see what I can find. And the one thing that has always really bothered me was when it stems from shipper CRM, mainly when people apply. I want to kind of at least like understand exactly who they are and confirm that the email that they're going to be using to like do prospecting is actually the email that they have an authority through. That's always been like a very big problem for me, and just has always made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I posted a finding here, which I'll share in a second, which basically I think this is my like hottest post I've ever done, which was cool. But anyway, what I found was of the data set that I had internally, that of the 2.14 million records, carrier records that I had, there were a total amount of carriers with an email address that was also used by another carrier, and by carrier I mean here like a US DOT number. There was about 91,000 different US DOT numbers sharing the same emails, and this was probably like the most, I don't know, ridiculous thing that I knew it was a lot. I just didn't realize that it was this much. And Ben weighed in. He definitely added some clarity, which Ben, maybe you can highlight where you were seeing a lot of this from in terms of like where a lot of these email addresses or maybe originate from.
Yeah, I know this because I dealt with it, when I had the factoring business, trying to figure out who's a good prospect, who do we contact, is that a lot of those are going to be third-party service bureaus, right? So Danielle, you didn't get through the process of setting up your DOT number, right?
I didn't. I couldn't get my address to go.
You were spared the inundation of spam, right? So I was talking to a guy that set up a new broker the other day, and he's like, yeah, I got 8 calls within the first 100 seconds of applying. And so what we find is that a lot of carriers, their email address gets rendered basically unusable. And so then they, set up a second email address that they actually are running their business through. And so I took kind of the data set that you were looking at and started just going through all the email addresses. I filtered it down so that it was an email address where it was shared between more than 5, right? Because I just picked a threshold there, but like it's totally legit to have 2 or 3 or probably even up to 4 companies that would share an email address, right? So we have like a client at the compliance business. They've got an excavating company, they've got a freight broker, and they've got a carrier. For insurance purposes, those all 3 need to be separate entities, but there's one person really running that. And so when I looked at kind of the filtered down data set, I was at the point where it was like, probably at least half of those emails are compliance related services.
Yeah, and that was a fair point. That was a totally fair point, because I then went back in and tried to do kind of grouping and just to actually see which emails these were, and I separated them into 2 buckets. There were the public generic domains, the emails with public generic domains, and there were the ones that were more company domains, like the ones that you typically see, not the Gmails and Yahoos and so forth. And so that was when I kind of posted this graph, which showed one email, like the top email address, the public email address domain was WTF FMCSA at AOL.com. And as a registrant agent address to be used by this many US DOT numbers is probably when you see this, some alarms should be going off at FMCSA.
They're aware of it.
They're at least aware of it. But look at there's so many other ones that are just at Gmail and at Yahoo, which is crazy.
On that one in particular, we've had, I think, like 15 new US DOTs this year registered with that email address. So at what point do they red flag those and say, we're not going to do this anymore?
WTF,
when was that?
AOL is alive and well, basically is what you're saying. Sorry, go ahead.
The latest count that I pulled had that in there like 325 times or something like that. So, and that was, data from, what day was it? It was earlier this week. Yeah. And so I don't know if they're proactively going through and calling that. I mean, they're very aware of the data set quality problem. I think Chris alluded to this earlier too. There is also like a resourcing issue. They are working very heavily on rebuilding the registration system to address, I'm not going to say all these issues, but really starting to try and tidy those up. And, we're seeing that it is getting harder and harder to register. Danielle, you would have had no problem probably in January getting through the registration process.
So one of the solutions that I, at least maybe it's a potential, it's an idea at least to kind of address it in a way that would allow, in my view, a lot of downstream benefits from software vendors and providers. If there was a way that the FMCSA, during the registration process, let's say conceptually, you were able to register with whatever email address you want. So if you had a third party register you, the contact email address is what you provide. But given to Garrett's point, Garrett made this great point, which I can let you articulate a little bit more about it, Garrett, which is that like the contact email was not originally meant for the use of like cross verification of whether or not an email address posing as a certain DOT number can be correlated back to the US DOT based on that contact email address. Is that correct, Garrett?
Yeah, I was just saying, I think you're referring to the post I made about like the data in there is really about contacting like the company. Like, you think about like, where do you send, like, we've got to reach out, where do we send stuff? Whereas a lot of the tooling we have out there for vetting and whatnot, even the reports we're doing, we're expecting that to be like the owners, like we're going to contact the owner, and that's just not always the case. And so it's like us trying to sort of like use the data that's out there for use cases it's not necessarily designed for. And that's where you kind of run into these issues, I think, with repeat emails that, we're seeing hundreds of these goofy email addresses that are being reused. It's because it's just the dumping grounds for like contacts that they're using.
Yeah.
So it's not even always nefarious. I think about how many times like I've gone and signed up for a cell phone plan and put like my spam email down. So they're like, I know they're going to sell this thing. So like, I don't want to actually make this my personal. It's like the same kind of thing.
Yeah. And so, and I thought that was a great point as well too. And really what started to become clear to me as the real issue is when we've all heard of the stories and seen screenshots and whatnot of people getting emails from a email domain, which let's say looks very similar to that of a legitimate company. Maybe it's like a letter off or something like this, or it's in just some way, shape, or form posing as a carrier in which it actually doesn't have that authority, right? So like a kind of like fraud or scam email. And I don't really see any alternative approach except for patchwork, and I don't mean that in the worst way possible, but like kind of a lot of these tech solutions that exist for vetting purposes, they come into the picture later on in the equation and are trying to basically make you aware of whether or not an email is fraudulent based off of reports from like community reporting. Whereas if we took a step back and we zoomed out here and tried to understand that when the FMCSA registration first started, like email wasn't really a dominant thing back when dial a truck was popular, right? And email all of a sudden it got added as a patch to the registration process. Now everybody pretty much does their primary business functions through email, and email is really difficult sometimes to manage in terms of, scams or whatnot, because, there's legitimately good scammers in a sense of that they're sophisticated, knowing how to knowing how to trick you into believing that they're a certain company that they're really not, right? And I don't see a different way other than having the FMCSA give you the ability to, very similarly how when you set up a Gmail enterprise account or company account, they ask you to add your domain and they give you a value, like a certificate value. It's a value you copy and paste into wherever you bought the domain from. You go into your settings and you paste the record in there. And that all of a sudden tells Gmail, like, this, you actually own this domain. And anytime that you send an email from it, all of a sudden it's going to be verified by Gmail or any other provider, because they'll be able to look up that record. I feel like that's a very important thing for the FMCSA to do, given that email is this dominant function that everybody uses to conduct business day. And it seems like Garrett and Ben, you guys had a little bit of, a different view on that.
Go ahead, Garrett.
All right, yeah. So as far as like just verifying domains, I just think it's sort of like it's a symptom of the problem. It's not actually the problem. The problem is really that people are able to, basically either buy a DOT number and like pose as somebody else, or just put down this, the spam email or someone really vague email, and we never can figure out who actually owns it and verify like the guy you're talking to is the guy that is actually the business owner. And so I think like I understand where you're going with like verifying domains and like, seeing like DNS. I mean, I don't think it's like it's an interesting concept of being able to like do that. But
we lost Garrett, I think.
Yeah, he was having.
I think the problem starts before then, because we still have the same issue. Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Okay, yeah. Spectrum, thanks a lot. Appreciate you. I've been having issues with my internet for like weeks now. Shout out Spectrum, big time. But yeah, anyway,
Go
I
through
was just
it again.
saying, what?
Go through that again.
Okay, yeah. So, basically, like, the domain makes sense, but it's sort of moving the problem. The real problem, I think, starts with like verifying at the time of like creation or transfer of a DOT. So, what I suggested was using something like ID.me or whatever that government website is, where you can actually verify yourself through your license and pictures, and basically building a system where a broker can use that and request verification of the ownership of a carrier, and it goes all centralized through the ID.me system. It's already a government system we have access to. Like, they just need to plug it in. And that would make it so that, first of all, you don't have all the carrier information just on the web, because that's also something we don't want to have. We don't want to force every carrier to be technical or to necessarily like just dump their personal cell phone on the web. So it lets us verify carriers, make sure they're legit, but also build a process for like a broker to go in, request access to verify their identity, and have the FMCSA actually own verifying the ownership of that carrier and tracking that, because that's their job. Like that is 100% their responsibility to be doing that. And so you're right. Like, all these other companies are doing similar things, but it's after the fact, and they're always going to be playing catch up, because at the end of the day, the FMCSA is the owner of if you can create a DOT number. So as long as the FMCSA doesn't fix it, like it won't. You can throw on as many band-aids as you want.
Yep.
So I think the big thing to me is we have to add red tape, but only in the places where there is fraud. And like when we're adding requirements for carriers to be like technical and things like that outside of that, it just feels like the bad guys are already technical. Like I was saying on Twitter, right? Like, it's easy for them to go set up a bunch of fake domains, set up DNS, but the little carrier that's like, Jim from Danielle's post the other day, like when you say, hey, you're gonna have to set up DNS to verify your domain, he's like, what the hell is that? I have no idea. And now all of a sudden
Jim can barely get into his email.
Yeah. And so it's just, finding a solution that kind of fits that bill better.
I think that's I think this technical requirement on carriers, I think is less daunting than it might seem, mainly because like just of the experience I had with during like COVID, when everybody was trying to figure out, myself included, how to file for PPP loans. I had no idea how to do it, and tons of carriers ended up figuring out as well how to do it. And at the end of the day, it is already something that a lot of the more sizable carriers do, because they don't email from at Gmails or at Yahoos, right? So it's not really something that carriers don't already do. It's just that there's a long tail of them that don't yet do it, mainly because it's not required of them. And sure, a bad actor can go in and register a bunch of domains, but really what matters is that there's a domain or set of domains that are tied back to the DOT through a certificate. And that's kind of like how, as you know, I don't have to kind of say this, but like that's how domain verification generally works, right? So Ben, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that as well.
To me, that just verifies that they're associated with a domain. Like, we see this from our factoring underwriting of, if somebody's wants to take you for a ride, like they're going to defraud you. We see fairly consistently, just even brokers, right, where they're not even having their identity, they're not getting hacked, they're just having their identity, so that they're having somebody set up a new domain, so that would solve that problem. But like, it won't solve business email compromise, which we see a lot, right? And it would give you, I think, a step of a feeling of confidence in something that I think there's not really a whole lot of reason to be confident that just because they have that domain doesn't mean that they're a good person, right? I
own like 25 domains.
Well,
you own 25 domains, Danielle?
At least, yeah.
So even if you'd own 25 domains, you'd only, like, if none of them are tied to a DOT, then downstream software providers that maybe help you in your inbox or whatever it might be, right? There's no way for them to say, okay, here's the DOT that this email says it's posing as, and this is the email that it's being sent from. Therefore, like, they won't be able to check. There's no possibility even to check. You have to use like a community aggregated reporting system, like Highway or I don't know if Carrier 411 does it or any other ones, verified carrier and so forth. But that's kind of like where I'm going at with the domains, is that if you register it and you tie it to the DOT, there's possibilities that open up of at least preventing one part of the problem, not solving the whole thing though. Because like I agree with you guys that there's tons of different attack vectors you can kind of take, right? I don't know if you guys have any other comments. I know we're up on time here as well too, but this was it was good to hear you guys more in depth on the other side.
Yeah, I'm glad we got to talk about it a little bit. I just want to end, I guess, with my high level point is really just that the solution should not add red tape where it's going to hurt the little guy, but still basically not make a dent in the bad guys. And your example of the PPP loans is a valid example, but I would say like that is an optional thing. People didn't have to go do that to become a carrier. And so I think when you're talking about adding requirements for every single carrier to do business, we just have to be really careful and thoughtful about what kind of policies we're pushing for. So
yeah, because it's not just a company that's running off the web. These are guys on the roads, either safely driving or killing people.
Well, I will say that anytime there's a new regulatory change, for example, ELD mandate, all of a sudden this entire huge market opened up for companies to start. So Ben, maybe you can go in and start offering a one-stop shop domain setup, purchasing, and all this stuff, for carriers, and it'll make you a lot of money. So
perfect. I mean, yeah, just maybe one final point is like for hire carriers is about 17% of the total US DOT number population. So it really is because we're not worried about John's I got the guys mowing the grass out back, right? Like they need a DOT number. Are we really concerned about them? It would add such a significant hurdle. I think
that's fair.
More thorough underwriting, probably from the broker side, like start to implement underwriting techniques from other industries. It's not fun. I'm not saying that the idea isn't like it's novel, right? And it could be cool, but I think you're gonna trap way more people than you're gonna help.
That's fair. Maybe it can be, if it is something that is done, it's restricted to just for hire companies that want to do for hire. But anyway, guys, thank you so much, all of you for coming on. This was great, great episode, and hope everybody enjoyed it. We will catch you all next week. Thanks so much. All right. See you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.